Welcome to Explore Parenting Growth, the channel where we help parents confidently guide their children towards success in life and career. Each week, we bring you real conversations, proven strategies, and inspiring stories to strengthen your parenting journey. Today, I'm joined by David Brown, a public speaking trainer and executive communication coach who has delivered over 2,500 presentations helping leaders communicate with clarity, confidence, and influence. He's also the president of DSB Leadership Group, author of Talk It Up, and has spent over 25 years as a minister, giving a unique perspective on developing both communication and character. Today, we're talking about how parents can raise confident and effective communicators. Dave, thank you so much for joining the show today. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. Glad to be able to spend some time with you, Corey, and of course, to be able to share some thoughts and ideas with your audiences.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a great conversation. I'd really like to start with this first question, and I'll say this, and this probably included myself in my early years of being a parent, and that's that most parents probably think that communication is something that does not need to be intentionally trained. And I assumed that it'll just develop naturally. But from your experience, where does this assumption kind of break down or fall short?
That's a great question, Corey, and I appreciate you asking that. I think we are in a time where there are parents, there are leaders that assume that just because your children are in an environment with you, perhaps they're around you, that they're going to develop these skills on their own, or they're going to develop it just because they're with you. And the truth of the matter is, you've got to be intentional with how you expose your children to this aspect of development. To me, it's important, whether you're in the boardroom, I'm training organizations, or I'm working with family and leaders like yourself, to be intentional with their children on how to pick up verbal cues, the importance of learning to listen, or active listening rather, and they'll be able to grow their EQ or their emotional intelligence. All this is important, but it doesn't happen just by giving them exposure or putting them in a certain environment. It happens with intentionality. It happens when you're literally shaping your child, no matter their age. It could be whether they're in elementary school, middle school, high school. You've got to help shape them, guide them, and be very intentional in order for them to become effective communicators.
Wow, thank you. That definitely sets the tone for sure. Now, I know that you have trained executives at a high level when it comes to communication. What would you say the difference between people who kind of get by and those who truly stand out?
For me, the big issue that I've found with working with executives and leaders are those who believe in investing in their overall presence, investing in their growth, and they're being very intentional with their communication skills. In other words, they own it. They don't just fly by the seat of their pants. They don't just assume that because they've got some title or some level of experience that they're going to be able to communicate a message and it's going to land and have the ability to impact the audience that they're addressing. The truth of the matter is, what separates leaders who are impactful, leaders who are able to grow and make a difference, are those leaders who do invest in themselves, do invest in what I believe is the most important trait of a leader. You've got to be willing to grow. You've got to be willing to learn. You've got to be willing to put in the time to invest in owning the spaces that you're in. It doesn't matter if your stage is 5 people or it's 5,000. You've got to be intentional. You've got to prepare. You've got to know your audience. And if you don't do that, you're going to quickly see in your career path, or at least in your career journey, that you are being separated from others because they've learned to communicate their value. And when you communicate your value with clarity and it's shown to be something that they need, you're going to rise up the ranks pretty quickly.
Gotcha. Thank you. Now, for parents, what are 2 or 3 things that parents can do today, like to really be intentional about developing their child's communication skills and abilities, I should say?
That's a great question. And stop me if I don't get to 3. There's so many ways to look at this. But Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson talked about how, in a lot of parents' journey, what's interesting about it is a child will spill something or they'll make a mistake and they're quickly being told, clean it up, or that's not what you're supposed to do, or this is not where you're supposed to go. In reality, we should be rewarding creativity, not the
Hmm.
ability to mimic what's being said, the ability to regurgitate what's being taught, and to look at the letter grades. Some of the most brilliant minds didn't necessarily have those A's, A pluses, A minuses. The most brilliant minds are those who could think creatively, think outside the box. So,
Sure.
what I would say if you are a parent of a younger child or even a parent of a high schooler, don't go with this simple yes or no answers. Don't ask your child, did you have a good day at school? Don't do that. You're going to get a yes or a no, more likely than not. Instead, you should ask, what was the most impactful part of your day? Or what was the most proud of yourself moment you had today? Ask questions that will get them to respond with more than just yes or no, and they're going to learn to communicate in an open dialogue, open-ended dialogue rather, than just that closed loop yes or no responses. You also want to spark that creativity by giving them the ability to expound on a story, for example. You
Okay.
want things to come out in story form. Everybody's got a story. As they get older, it'll be a narrative that they're carrying. When you're doing an elevator pitch or when you're doing an investor pitch, there's a story that's behind it that carries the weight of that message. Teach them to tell stories. It doesn't always have to begin with once upon a time, although once upon a time is where oftentimes you're going to see listeners lean in, interest be piqued. So ask them to tell you their day in a story, or ask them to tell you what happened in a story form. And then you're going to create that sense of tying in messaging that can be heard and delivered in a way that I believe as they get older will become an invaluable tool and asset. You asked for two or three. Those are two. I would say the other thing I would say that's important. I know this is a different generation. When I grew up, we didn't have cell phones.
Sure.
My children, of course, you know our children similar ages, we they
Yeah.
had phones. And so for us, it would be no electronics at the table. Why is this important? Because somehow you've got to just turn that off and engage with people. If you don't engage with people, then I believe that that could come down the road to be a detriment for them, where they're not able to learn to socially interact with others. They're not able to learn to engage on an emotional level. We can't hide behind the digital. We can't hide behind just our cell phones and our laptops, our screens. So find ways to disengage. Not that you say 10 minutes a day, no electronics. How about just when we're at a meal together or when we're watching a show together, let's put away the electronics. That to
Hmm.
me helps them to learn to get out of that box, that moment of just being just driven with all this electronical information, the data that comes from there, and learning to engage with people one on one, face to face, mano to mano. So, if there were a couple things I would say, Corey, those would be my tips for creating that.
Thank you. And along those lines, what do you believe the impact of the electronics and all the screen time has done to really the communication skills and level of so many children today? I mean, I have my own opinions, but I definitely want to hear yours. So,
You're the one that's coaching parents, so you probably hear a whole lot more than I do. I'm generally engaged with CEOs, engaged with C-level, with managers, and they may from time to time bring up stories about their children. But what I'll say is this: from my time at SMU, my time at University of Maryland Loyola, and teaching at that level, is that you don't want to get a generation, the Gen X, the up and comers, a generation where they're so connected digitally that they're not really developed interpersonally,
mhm.
and it's awkward. They don't know how to speak with somebody. They're in a room. They don't realize their body language is speaking for them. They don't engage people face to face. They don't respond with what they're hearing. They're just reacting to what's being said. And because of that, they don't know how to read social cues. Because of that, they don't know how to handle conflict in real time. They want to get back to you. They want to go back and research or type something up and bring it to you instead of learning how to respond to the person or to the individuals that are before them. And to me, that could be a challenge. I'm not saying that's for everyone, Corey, but I do
Mhm.
believe that if you're not disconnecting, you're only setting your child up, you're only setting your children up to engage in a world where they don't know how to interface with people. And that to me could hurt them. And if it hurts them on that level, it will shake their confidence up. And what
Sure.
we don't want are our next generation leaders to be hesitant. They need to be learning to become more assertive with their ideas, assertive with what they want to see done instead of leaning back worrying about the whiplash or the backlash rather from what can
Yeah.
be done from that. Yeah.
Yeah, that is great advice. Thank you. I want to kind of move into your experience as a minister. Now, I made the kind of the announcement in the beginning that you've spent 25 years as a minister, and my question along that lines is, how do you see communication tied to character and not just performance?
That's a great question. One thing that might be interesting for your listening audience, if they go to my website or they're around me at any of my speaking events, etc., you're probably going to hear the evangelist of authenticity. You got to be real, be who you are.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an identical twin. My twin brother and I do not communicate the exact same way. He's an engineer, aka nerd, but everything for him has to make sense. It's logical. There's a pattern. There's a system, a process that has to be followed. Whereas for me, I'm more of the idea. How do we want to look at this from a holistic approach? How do we want to look at this from a different angle? But those are our strengths. I won't necessarily come to you with all these different facts and statistics, but that's how he likes to communicate. And most of his audiences resonate with that. So
Yeah.
for me, I would say from my years of speaking, my years of leading churches and in ministries, I try to look for the character of somebody. What do I seeing? How do I evaluate how consistent they show up? Do their words match the outcome? We
Hmm.
talk all the time, a big game, but are we actually following through with what we say we're going to do? Can we be relied upon? Those are some of the things I've learned over the last 25 years. But I'll also say this, Corey, is this. When you're speaking with somebody, it's very important to be able to understand where they're saying. Communication comes at so many different levels. You've got to be able to listen with empathy. Listening from the standpoint of, if I were in their shoes, if I was in their place, how would I feel about this?
Yeah.
And I try to teach when I'm counseling or teach when I'm helping other leaders when they're doing their one-on-ones or preparing for the one-on-ones is, are you listening to understand? Maybe they had a hard day. Maybe there's something going on in their life, not necessarily bad, but it might be imperative upon you to learn to dig deeper.
Okay.
Speak with the spirit of empathy, speak with the spirit of understanding. That to me has been something that's been helpful for me. And I've been able to take that and translate that not only from the churches that I've supported, but now also to corporate America and to the business world I work with.
Gotcha. And I greatly appreciate your work, not just ministry wise, but also working with senior level executives and really high achieving adults. When you think about those particular people or types of people, what communication mistakes do you believe they may be unintentionally passing down to their kids?
Ooh, that's such an awesome question. That's an awesome question. If they only see mom or dad always on the phone, quick to respond, then they may be passing down a habit of not listening for more understanding, not asking the next question. To me, what I would say is important is you pass down to your children a habit of being the most inquisitive, the most curious
Hmm.
person in the room. Ask so many questions that you can't help but walk away with knowing the entire story. But
Gotcha.
if all they hear from their parents are yes, no, quick, do this, do that, then they're not going to walk away with the impression my parents really listen to understand. They're really quick to try to get the whole picture. They're just short form, get to the point, get to the answer. To me, that's something that isn't necessarily healthy. The other thing I would say is this, and this comes from a lot of parents, especially first time parents, parents with young children, and they're trying to overcompensate perhaps for mistakes that they felt like they received from their parents. And they want to be the ultra dad or the ultra mom, and they don't leave room for mistakes. They don't leave room for growth. They overcorrect. They overemphasize everything. For example, there's padding on everything. I don't mean this necessarily for the furniture. I'm talking about with how you say things. You don't want to hurt
Yeah.
their feelings, so you pad everything. You put the socket covers on everything. And when you try to protect your children from that, then the first time they get disappointed in the real world, the first time they're told no or rejected when they're on a sales call, it will
Yeah.
literally make them feel as if they're the worst leader, worst speaker, worst salesperson in the world. You can't cushion them so much to the point where they don't know how to work through disappointment. They don't know how to build that sense of resiliency. And that's really what we want from our children, because it's not going to
Sure.
always be roses and peaches and the best everything. You want them to be
Yeah.
able to feel like they can overcome and work through things. So I would say be careful with how you speak with others around them. Be mindful that if you overly protect, overly correct, that you may not allow them to work through that resiliency muscle and then learn to be able to develop that character for themselves.
Gotcha. Now, based on what you just said there, if we are doing those things, we're helping our children to become really good communicators. We're being intentional and we're focused on how we communicate to them or what we show them in our lives. Um, what do you think happens for a child who becomes an excellent communicator after the age of 18? What type of, by the time they're 18, I'll say, what types of advantages does that give them in life?
I love this question. And I'll tell you something that's been really surprising for me, Corey, is how many students that I'm literally doing classes on teaching that don't even have a LinkedIn profile.
Hmm.
And I'm sitting there going, wait a second here. You've got to have your own LinkedIn profile, because that's, at least at this level, the social media platform that business leaders communicate on. Now, I'm
Sure.
not talking about your Instagram, Twitter, your TikToks. Those are fine if that's what they want to do. But by the
Yeah.
way, I would also say be very mindful of that. But in the business world, when you're turning 18, 19, you're going to college, you're going to the workforce, you've got to communicate in ways that other leaders will understand. And part of that is having an effective LinkedIn really profile. The other thing I would say is learning how to network effectively.
Okay.
When you're literally in that 18, 19, 20-year part of your life, you're starting to engage with leaders who want to be able to look at what's in it for them and how can I benefit you and support what you're doing. And if you don't know how to master networking, if you're not effective in communicating your value, even at that level, you're going to hurt yourself. So I've been impressed with the leaders that I've seen that are 18, 19, 20, who are taking communication classes, who are taking these entrepreneurial classes, who are learning to communicate their value, that they're starting to leverage their network. They're starting to learn to build the story even behind what they show the world through their LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
So that would be the thing I would share is I've seen and been impressed with so many young leaders who not only aspire to do great things with their life and the impact they want to make, you see it even on the levels as little as, or dare I say, big as a LinkedIn profile.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, I want to have you teach us a little bit right here. And this is my final question I'll have for you, but I want you to do some teaching for us. Um, you just talked about obviously the coaching and the training that you've done. If there is a child who is around 12, 13 years old and they're nervous about speaking in front of others, can you kind of walk us through how you would coach
Yes.
that child?
I think that's a great question. And I love how you said a 12-year-old child. Not all 12-year-olds are built the same, but around that
Mhm.
age, you start to really see certain aspects of their character come out. Number one, I would say fear is common to everyone. Don't let someone walk around pretending like they're never afraid. To me, that person's not a real authentic, genuine person. That person's lying. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what you want to do is be able to say fear is real. Normalize it. Hey, I see it. I felt it. But now what do I do to work through this? And something that I try to do is I try to walk them through the story that they tell themselves when they face fear. What do you tell
Mm.
yourself when you're feeling fearful? Or do you tell yourself that something's wrong with me? Do you tell yourself the idea of I'm alive? That means my nervous system's kicking in. I know that something good is going to happen. What do you tell yourself when you start to feel fearful? And once we capture that picture, once we capture what that is, we then start to label truths to it. Is this
Okay.
real? Is this true? Could this really happen to you? Okay. And when you start labeling if it's true or not, then the fear starts to dissipate. Then you start to realize there's nothing to be afraid of.
Hmm.
The other thing I share with them is that could you imagine when you're speaking to the room that you're in, that they all want you to be successful? And then you get them to nod their head and they believe that and say,
Yeah.
guess what? They're not a threat. Fear comes because you don't want to feel rejected. Fear comes because you don't want to mess up. But imagine if they all want you to be successful. Imagine If they all want you to succeed and they want to take something from you that's going to help them, then guess what? That fear starts to dissipate. The other thing I try to do is get them to look at the practice of making the time, whether it's 1 day a week, 1 day a day, to set aside for training and preparing themselves. The more you prepare, the better off you're going to be when those moments get intense.
Yeah.
The Steph Currys of the world, these incredible athletes, they're taking 1,000 shots a day only for that one shot they may make in the game itself when it matters. So practice what they want to do. Practice the introduction. Practice the body of their presentation. Practice how they're going to close out their speech. Practice how they're going to say hello all throughout the day. And if I can share this with you, I'm going to give you a tip that I give even to C-suite members, business owners. This is what I tell them. Take your phone, record a message using your phone. It could be an introduction. It could be the first part of your presentation. And what you're going to do after you record yourself, okay, is you're going to turn the volume all the way up on your phone, place the phone face down, okay, and you're going to listen to yourself. And as you listen to yourself, take out your journal. Everybody should have a writing journal. Take out your journal. On one side of the journal, write what needs to change and write the number 1 next to it, because you're only allowed to write one thing you want to change. On the other side of the journal, write what I loved. What did I love about it? And you're allowed to write as many things you loved about how you sounded. Did I use filler words? That might be the only thing you're allowed to say you don't like. Or it could be, I spoke too fast. That's a sign of nerves. But then on the other side of the sheet, you might say, I sounded funny. I love that story. I love the pace of my speech. Everything you do. Because what you're doing psychologically, you're training your brain to look for all the things that you like about yourself, not what you don't like. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your phone and pick it back up again. And you're this time going to put the volume all the way down, and you're going to watch yourself. You're going to flip the page over. On the left-hand side, you're going to write one thing you didn't like. I didn't smile. My face gave it all away. Whatever. It was just one thing. And then the other side, you're going to celebrate everything you loved. I smiled. I looked like I was engaged. I looked like I enjoyed that conversation. I used my body language in a way that was very helpful. That's what you're going to do. And then the third thing you're going to do is you're going to pick your phone back up, turn up the volume, and watch yourself, listen to yourself, and you're only going to look for the one thing you didn't like on your body language, how you sounded, and you're going to look for everything you loved, everything you felt like resonated with you, and then you're going to practice this again and again until that one thing you didn't like is no longer there.
Gotcha.
But everything you loved will be there, and this is how you improve as a speaker. Now, trust me, when I share this with 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds, they think it's silly, but then I get messages all the time. Dave, the phone worked. This is when electronics work. If you do this with your children, I'm telling you, they're going to work through their fears. They're going to overcome their fears. They're going to realize that there are things there that were meant to protect them. That's okay. There are things that are there that they think will hurt them, were never meant to hurt them at all. They're going to see the audience as people, as those who want the best for them. And they're going to practice in a way that's going to help them to be prepared for any stage they go on. This is what I would do. And I'll tell you this, even when you celebrate your wins or the things that you loved, don't just leave it there. Share it with the people that matter most to you. Because what will happen is they're going to start acknowledging when they see those things about you as well. So you're not only celebrating you, others are going to celebrate you as well. And so that 12-year-old literally go from that stage to any stage you get on, and they're going to feel as if their confidence is there, that they belong to be there, and then once they speak, that what they say is meant to be heard. I promise you, Corey, that these students at 12 that go through this, they're going to become the most confident leaders in the room.
Wow, that was phenomenal advice, not just for a 12-year-old, but for myself as well. I mean, that seriously, I'm going to start doing that myself also this week so that I can be better at doing these conversations right here. But I greatly appreciate all the insights, all the information that you gave. This was fruitful not only for someone being a parent, but it's also fruitful for someone who wants to learn to be a better communicator in general. So I
That's good.
thank you. I thank you so much for your time. Please tell us where, if you have something else you'd like to add, please go ahead.
I would love to share a thing that I think people might often remiss. Even the most effective communicators can refine, sharpen the saw, so to speak. And
Mm-hmm.
the way to do that is through getting outside resources. Sometimes that could come in the form of a coach, myself, my organization. It could come from our podcast programs, our books. As a matter of fact, your son helped me with our book, Talk It Up. And so we've got a student edition that's going to be coming out soon for those parents that you work with, Corey, that will work with this. They can
Yes.
see that they can use this. So I would say find the resources to support your growth, wherever it may come from. Your YouTube channel, our podcast, our books, or even coaching. Let's continue to give our students the best resources so they can thrive and succeed. Trust me, they spend enough money sending them to all the AAU, the gymnastic tournaments. They're flying
Yes.
all over the country. There's money there, but if you invest it in their own personal growth,
Mm-hmm.
imagine what that would do for their long-term run, their future, and their career. So parents, you want the best for your children. Invest in them by your personal example and invest in them with these type of resources.
Absolutely. Um, can you just tell us where we can find you, where people can find you, and the work that you do, so that if there's anyone, and I would highly suggest if you're considering improving your communication level and skill, and you're looking for someone to do that, I believe that David would be an excellent person to help you with that. Please tell us how we can find you.
Thank you so much for allowing me to share that, and it's very humbling. Find me on LinkedIn, David Suk, S-U-K Brown. You could go to DSB, that's David Suk Brown, leadershipgroup.com. You could go to appmeetup.com, that's APPMEETUP.com. Those would probably be the easiest ways to find me.
Gotcha, gotcha. Well, David, thank you so much. We're also going to have your information in the podcast so people can see it. It will be on screen. And so, once again, thank you for your time. And as we always say, parenting is a journey. Explore your growth.